Hello, I'm John Michael Riley, and I'm currently an assistant professor at Oklahoma State University. And this is the third of three videos that should offer some insight into a hedging game I created in the fall of 2015 and that I use in classes that I teach. I frequently use this in a senior level commodity futures market course, and I occasionally use it in a junior level ag markets and price analysis course. Now this is the third video, so if you haven't watched the other two, I encourage you to move in sequential order. The first video kind of gives a look at what the students actually see, kind of the operation of the game in the moment and how it functions. The second video provided some behind the scenes look at where the data that flow into the game came from and the adjustments that were made and how it then flows into what the students see. This final video, the goal of this final video is to show you the form that the students use to provide their decision making and then a tabulation sheet. Quick caveat, any errors that I make, and I apologize for those in advance, egregious errors, I will start the video over. Very minor, bumps and pauses and ums, I'll just kind of power through, and I hope you'll forgive me for that. Not going to look as many spreadsheets today, but we still will be seeing some, and I hope I'm not alone in saying that spreadsheets that I create, while I make every effort to be organized, they typically aren't the best, and I know what I'm doing, but an outside individual would probably be lost. That's the goal of the video, is to kind of give you some insights into what I was thinking, kind of the method to the madness. But this, along with all materials, will be shared online. Please take a look. If you have any questions that aren't answered by the videos or the paper, please let me know. That being said, let's jump into this third video, again, where the goal is to kind of show you some of the stuff that the student uses to provide information to me. So we're starting here at this front page again. So this, just to kind of give a brief overview, this is a game that students, where they make decisions about futures market decisions with respect to an eastern Nebraska corn farm. They provide information about their hedging decision at planting, a decision on a futures market decision at emergence, and a futures market decision at midsummer, and then everything is known for that crop year. The actual outcomes are known at harvest. So the question is, how do the students provide that information to me? Well, they are given a tabulation sheet that they record information by hand on. Now there's a blank version that they are given. Let me pull that over here. So there's a blank version that they're given, and so after we move through the practice round, then they're actually filling out their own decisions. They kind of jot down that first set of information: expected yield, expected production, expected basis, and expected cash price. And then they kind of start moving through making decisions about the number of futures contracts, what the price was at that point in time, and then once they know the final price, any gains or losses that were experienced on that trade. So all of that is recorded by them. And in the original iterations of the game, this is all I used. However, it was a little limiting because obviously students could go back and make adjustments, and also it was very slow and very tedious. So I wanted to try to speed it up. Currently, I'm able to get through the practice year and then 4 crop years: crop year 1, crop year 2, crop year 3, crop year 4, and then usually the class period is over. I start slow at the very beginning, and then usually in crop year 3, crop year 4, I speed it up quite a bit so that we can finish it out in the time allotted. So this was the original way that I was collecting that information. I have since moved to an online form, a Google form, which a student would continue to progress through and give the information. At the very beginning of the class period, I have the students provide their name, the last 4 digits, their student number. Here at Oklahoma State, we call it a CWID, and campus-wide identification number. And then they provide me some responses to a few pre-game questions. And this is just so I can, provide some analytics as to how well the game performed in terms of knowledge gained. And the outcomes of that are shared in the article. So I asked them some questions. They fill those out. And then they continue. So this is the first block of questions that they ask, and then they have to continue. I tell them, once you get to the start of the planning decision at crop year 1, to pause and not move forward until so we all kind of stay on the same page. So after they answer those questions, we get to crop year 1, and as we match up the game to their decisions, we start here. They jot that information down on that hard copy. I provide the figure that kind of gives some context about where prices have been, and then I ask them to make a decision. So they jot down on their hard copy their decision about the number of contracts, and then they also go into this form and they provide the number of they provide the number of contracts that they choose to take a position on. The current iteration, I only allow them to take a short position in year 1, but in years 2, 3, and 4, they can take a long or a short position. This is the first year, this is the first time I did that, and that's the most recent iteration of the game for the spring 2019 semester. But prior to that, I only let students take short positions, and that is probably a method that can be implemented by others. And I went through the hows and whys in video 1 on that, so I won't spend the time. But again, they take a position and they provide that to me through this form. I also have them go ahead and give me that futures price, and this is just me kind of a check to make sure that they're paying attention. I collect that. I kind of know what that is already, but this is just my way of saying, okay, who was or who wasn't really kind of in the know about what's going on. Well, I tell them to stop, so they place that, and then they continue to the next session. I say section, I say pause, we go back, and at this point I switch to the emergence screen. I give them kind of the context of where prices have been, up until crop emerging in late May. And I tell them again, make a decision about how many futures contracts you want to take a position on to protect the price at 457. They enter that information into the form. Crop year number 1, emerging decisions, how many positions, and then I ask them again what the price is, just to kind of make sure they're paying attention. They make that decision. We move to the third time period in the growing season, midsummer. I tell them, okay, tell me how many positions you would like to take at a price of 361. They submit that information through the form. Through the midsummer decision, I ask them again the price just to make sure we're paying attention. And then we move to harvest. I tell them to pause until we get to the next screen on the spreadsheet. We get to the next screen on the spreadsheet, which is harvest, and now we know everything in actuality. So then they provide their outcomes. What was the actual yield? What was the cash price? What was the price at harvest? And then here for this first crop year, I go ahead and have them calculate the realized price and the profit. So based on all the info, now that we know everything, I have them take a moment and calculate that. This takes a while. I'd like to speed it up even more than what I've done with my tabulation sheet, but I do want the students to actually go through the process of making those calculations just to reinforce some of the concepts that we've covered in class. So that's the end of crop year 1, and then essentially this form just repeats. So we go back to the very beginning of the front page for our sheet. I choose a different production year essentially. I'll go 8 since I think I did that earlier. And this just updates all of the information that they're provided, the students are provided, and then we walk through these sheets again and they update based on this new production year. And again, along the way, we step through these, I won't say slowly, but give them a chance to make those decisions, provide me the information that they have, more importantly, how many contracts they're entering into, and at each stage of production. And then we get to the end of the growing season at harvest, and they provide the outcomes. Now, I don't have them calculate for year 2, 3, and 4. I don't have them calculate the realized price and the profit, largely because it's just such a time-consuming process, and I want to speed it up. I want to get through more than just the first crop year. But all of this is done through this online form, and also they should be jotting it down on that hard copy just to have that available as well. So wash, rinse, and repeat. We go through the next year, they provide their decisions, and then we go through the 4th year, they provide their decisions, And then, we get to the end of the game, and then I have them answer these final post questions, which are essentially a reiteration of the previous questions, just to see if there's any knowledge gained from playing the game. I first ask them, did it increase their understanding of hedging? And then I ask those 3 questions again about whether, the ins and outs of what is hedging and how does it work. And so I can use that to then do some analysis. They submit the form, and everything updates in a spreadsheet. So the pros and cons of the Google form is that, number one, the students can go back with the Google form. I can't turn that off. There are other survey type question or software programs that maybe would not allow students to go back. Google Forms are, it's what I've been using here. That is a bit of a caveat. However, I will say that it moves fast enough that they would be challenged to go back and make adjustments and still stay up to date on the game. And that's again why I asked that question about what's the futures price, just to see who's paying attention, to try to catch maybe a little bit of nefarious activity. Another thing is that my tabulation sheet doesn't update until the students submit. So unfortunately, I'm not able to really kind of keep tabs on who's progressing well, who's making money, who's losing money, who's minimizing risk, who's really just exposing themselves to some risk until the end. And so that's another kind of fallback with respect to using the Google form. But all of that, after they submit that information, flows into this response sheet. And this is the responses from the most recent semester that I taught this. I've kind of whited out the students' names, but these are responses, and they're information about the number of contracts. And then essentially this flows into a results sheet where I calculate for each student how much profit they had, the standard deviation of the profit, and then also the coefficient of variation of the all 4 crop years. So we don't take into account the practice year. We start at year 1, and we essentially put the spreadsheet pulls in the students' decisions, futures prices at all these different points in times, cost of production, to calculate a revenue, how much money was gained or lost in the futures market, and then a realized price and a profit. Okay. And that's a similar process for year number 2, a similar process for year number 3, and also for year number 4. And then essentially I just calculate a total profit and then a standard deviation of that profit over a 4-year period. And then a coefficient of variation based on that. My futures gains and losses are tabulated in each of these individual spreadsheets. Futures gains and losses year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4. I'm about out of time, so I may not go into specific detail, but I encourage you to kind of poke around and look. It's a little bit involved because they can take long and short positions. That took me a little while to put together, but it's calculating correctly. And so I like the idea of having this available to me at the end of the game to then be able to, this allows me to maybe incentivize a little bit. This most recent semester, I brought in 3 prizes and said the person with the highest profit gets a prize. The person with the lowest standard deviation of profit, kind of the goal of risk management is to minimize the variation over from one year to the next. So the individual with the lowest the less risk profit got a prize, and so those were some incentives that I provided at the onset. I'm out of time on this last video, so I'm going to stop here, and hopefully all of the issues, all of the questions have been addressed either through these videos or through the article itself and the supplemental material. I appreciate the look that appreciate you kind of looking at these videos. Obviously, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to contact me, and I hope that this is something that can be employed in your classroom as it relates to futures market and hedging.